welcome back to PPCM's Painful Truth. Today's guest, Halie Wiese.
Okay. Hi, Halie.
Hi.
Thank you today for working with me. Mom life.
I understand completely.
But thank you for your time today in educating everybody with your peripartum cardiomyopathy PPCM experience. Why don't you tell me where you are in the United States and what year and when were you first educated with this preventable disease?
Sure. I'm currently living in Des Moines, Iowa. I recently moved here from Denver. It was 2 years ago that I was pregnant with my daughter in 2019. And I had, I believe, the PPCM during my pregnancy at the end, and then definitely suffered from it after having my child. And I recovered, I would say, fully about July of 2020.
Okay. And so, yes, afterwards, PPCM definitely peaks, especially what I went through. Everything just like exasperated after. How much longer after did like the symptoms, and what were those symptoms that you're talking about that, you know, got progressively worse after giving birth?
Sure. I can kind of just tell my story a little bit if you'd like.
Yeah. Why don't you just feel free to, you know, if you want to start from the beginning on like, you know, what weeks you started to feel like something wasn't right, and who, most importantly, who was it that diagnosed you? Was it your obstetrician? Was it the ER?
Well, that's kind of the struggle with all of this, is that no one could really pinpoint that and say that it was PPCM. So I had symptoms during my pregnancy. At the end, I had significant weight gain. I had this constant chest pressure and chest pain, and I couldn't sleep lying down. I needed to sleep in an elevated position. My blood pressure increased greatly towards the end, and I expressed these concerns. I let people know about my symptoms. I went to see my OB, referred me to my general physician because she was concerned. And I ended up seeing a nurse practitioner who said that I was probably experiencing some sort of anxiety, or I just was having heartburn, and that I needed to take some Tums. So that didn't help. And I continued to feel this extreme chest pressure. Mm-hmm. I delivered my baby on December 20th of 2019. And at that time, my symptom would be the same. I couldn't lie down, and I had very low blood pressure. And I was just...
So you felt dizzy. I know what that feels like. You feel like you're going to faint. Yes. When you have low, it's different than high blood pressure. When you have low blood pressure, it's like, it's almost as if like you're not walking, you're floating.
Yes. Oh, it was terrible.
They're awful. Yeah.
And I honestly looked just about the same pregnant wise as when I arrived. Okay. I didn't lose anything in my stomach, and instead my legs started to swell, and my feet were so swollen. Yeah. And you could just see it in my face. And I, again, I expressed this concern to the nurses and my doctor there, and they said that this was anxiety and that I need to go home because I had a toddler at home. He was 2 at the time, and that I should just go home and be with them. And it's just anxiety. Right. I went home,
which is extremely common. It's just rare for them to have PPCM awareness like as we say, PPCM is not rare. It's just rarely diagnosed. And, everything that you experienced is so, it's so common to me as well. Cause this is so common, which is why I don't understand. They send home women that are literally having heart failure and saying that they have anxiety. I mean, it's unanimous across the board. So did you end up going home, and then from there, how did you progress?
So I went home, I listened to them, and I think, okay, well, maybe it is anxiety. So I tried to go along with the evening, try to sit down for dinner with my family, and this chest pressure buildup and almost kind of a release was just still happening. And it was so significant. I just couldn't stand it. So I said, I have to go to the emergency room. So I went basically home from the hospital, turned right back around and went to the emergency room. And they said the only thing they could find is, they said I had all this fluid on my lungs, and I had bradycardia. I think my heart rate was in the 40s. Yeah. And they said that again, we think you're just experiencing anxiety, and to go home. And so I did that. And then in my mind, I just thought, this is how it's going to be. This is how it is. I'm just going to feel like this. So it's right before Christmas, because I had her on December 20th, went home on December 23rd. So I just went along. I went Christmas shopping. I remember walking through Target, and I just couldn't, I just thought, I can't make it. I can't make it out to my car. But I moved along, and then come Christmas Day, Christmas evening, we're all opening our Christmas presents. And I just felt like my heart wasn't even beating, and I couldn't really move. It was just so terrible. And so as a mom, you have your kids or my child opening Christmas presents. You don't want to interrupt that and, ruin the excitement. And so just trying to sit there, and the whole time I'm, holding my chest, and I kind of secretly take my blood pressure, and my heart rate at the time was like 30, and my blood pressure was it was close to 200 over 160, something like that. Mm-hmm. And still having that put in my head where I'm told I just have anxiety, I stood up and I said, I think I just need some juice. That's what I need.
Right. Just maybe some sugar or something just to kind of snap you out.
Everything just started to kind of go like this.
Yeah.
And so at that point, all I could get out was like, call 911. So I went to the emergency room via ambulance on Christmas Eve. And it was pretty surreal standing outside waiting for that ambulance to come, because all the lights, my parents' neighborhood is the one that has all the Christmas lights in it. So people are driving by, and I feel like I'm just going to die.
Yeah, your body was at that point just like failing. Yeah.
And it was so surreal, because there's Christmas music going on in the background, Christmas lights, and all I'm waiting is for that ambulance to come. And I remember getting in. Of course, it was terrible because I could hear my kids just crying. But and I'm telling all of the paramedics, it's just anxiety. It's just anxiety.
Oh God, you poor thing. Yeah.
And they're saying, "Oh, hon, your heart rate doesn't go that low when it's anxiety. Can we cut your sweater open, because we're probably going to have to shock you back to life." And it was just pretty terrible. So I went to the hospital.
So sorry.
And they took my BNP and troponin, and that came back normal. And then but my heart rate was still about between 30 and 35. It did reach, I think, 26 or 28 in the ambulance. Mm-hmm. And so they admitted me, and the doctor who was working that night He was kind of just very, very interesting man, but he wouldn't leave my room. And he kept looking at me, and he said that, you remind me of a patient I had years ago when I worked at Mount Sinai. She had what was called peripartum cardiomyopathy. And I think that's what you have. What I want to do is I want to give you some Lasix. And I also want you to drink a latte to get that heart rate up. So he ordered me a latte from the Starbucks.
Bless his heart.
And again, he wouldn't leave my room. And
what was his name?
Dr. I believe it's Pressmack. No, Dr. Pressmack. I'm sorry. I'd have to get that for you. I'm so sorry. I don't remember that name. Yeah, I can't.
At what hospital?
I've seen a lot of doctors. St. Anthony's North in Colorado.
Okay.
Oh, doctor. I could ask my husband. He's in the other room. But then a while later, they tested for my BNP and troponin again. And at that point, I believe it came in at, my BNP was at 1400. Mm-hmm. And he was very concerned.
If it's over 300, that's those levels that are elevated are, a life threat, or that's so high like that. So yes.
So he said, he was such an interesting man. He's used some sort of Clint Eastwood quote, and he said, this is out of my league. You need to go to a hospital that has a cardiac ICU, telemetry, something that you can really be monitored closely. And so he mentioned airlifting me to another hospital, but we kind of agreed on going via ambulance, because the thought of getting in some sort of air transportation was just going to be too much for me. And so they take me by ambulance to Presbyterian St. Luke's. And I think it was because it was Christmas that the balls just kind of got dropped, because I was supposed to go to cardiac ICU. And instead I ended up in labor and delivery, where I wasn't monitored with anything. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the nurses would come in and ask where my baby was. And, the doctor from St. Anthony's North, he had rushed in, said that I was in severe heart failure. And just, once he said all of that, I just sort of checked out. And so I wasn't really able to advocate for myself. And no one was there with me. My husband was at home with the kids. So I'm by myself in the hospital. And so when I'm in labor and delivery, I didn't have the mindset at that time to say, hey, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. And so they didn't do anything, not until the next day. It was the late afternoon that they completed an echo. And by that time, because he had given me so much Lasix, by that time I looked like a completely different person. My face had swollen down. My stomach was gone. My legs were all normal. My feet were normal. And my symptoms were just this extreme neck pain, chest pressure again, and I couldn't lie down. And the cardiologist there really dismissed those symptoms. He didn't care about my neck pain. He said that maybe I have pericarditis because I couldn't lie down. And it was just a real struggle. So they checked so I did get an echo finally that afternoon, and it came back normal. Now the question is it normal because all of that fluid was removed?
Absolutely. I think that's because this is what peripartum cardiomyopathy is. It's not necessarily a heart disease. It's the fluid that's crushing the heart, creating the heart to enlarge and weaken until suffocation. So when you remove that fluid off the heart and you cure the infection, if it does create infection, because with fluid comes infection, then you're fully recovered. Pretty much, we usually either get a magnesium drip, but Lasix is definitely, takes down, like literally, gets all that fluid out of your body. I had over 50 pounds of fluid, that exactly the Lasix, what they did, that's how they, drained me as well, because I looked. And so it's very common, where, um, a woman has fluid, and that fluid can crush your organs and most definitely your heart. And that is what's called peripartum cardiomyopathy. That's why young women that are like 18 and 23, and I'm interviewing them, and they're like, I'm so healthy, because young girls and women never think of maternal mortality, let alone that it could happen to them, because this is a young, healthy woman disease. This disease is a disease all on its own. There's nothing, other than like preeclampsia, but like this is a very specific disease created by the placenta, that the growth and the cardiotoxic fluid. So that's why every pregnancy is different, because when the placenta is growing, there is a test to see if that is what's creating the fluid, which the SFLT1, which is the cardiotoxic fluid, and the PIGF blood test, which is the placental growth factor, and the two of them can create the diagnosis. But we're relying on also the NT-Pro BNP test, which is the only like real blood test for early diagnosis as early as 10 weeks pregnant. So women that are saying, in other countries, and when they're diagnosed in gynecology, whereas most American women are diagnosed in the ER. So that's a very that's very very real, just the way it is. And so we don't have the SFLT1 PIGF, because when we contact the hospitals, they don't have that provided. Some don't have that provided in their lab area. So every hospital has like a LabCorp.
Mhm.
And some don't have that instrument and kit. And I was told by the company that makes the kit and instrument to those blood tests that FDA has not approved them. So it's not approved in America. So women, also young girls, when you're giving birth and you're pregnant, you kind of rely on your obstetrician and gynecologist and birth worker, birth keeper, and other pregnancy specialists around you, not cardiologists. Whereas women today are now requesting the NT-Pro BNP test, but they're getting denied and refused to get and receive the test, because they're saying that they're healthy and fine, because all their other blood work says they're healthy and fine. But there's the confusion that every test that I had, said that I was fine. I was a perfectly healthy pregnant woman, when in fact I was dying just like you, and I had cardiac arrest, death, bad, like gone, like in a coma. Like
You were?
I was, it took them days to thaw me out. I had, and they, like you, it was around, the holidays, and they were all going out for Christmas lights, and I slept all day. And when I told my husband, when he says, oh, they're going to see Christmas lights, and I don't remember anything, I already checked out. And Cedar Sinai in Beverly Hills, they sent me home to go to Thanksgiving, and we were in Arizona. And so everybody was going to see the Christmas lights, and I was with the baby. Baby was 3 months old, and I was tired still. So he hung back, because he thought it was odd that I slept all day and that I was still really tired. So he had to, that night I had the seizure and the stroke in bed with the baby, and then he gave me CPR and put me on the floor and, so it was like a flat floor so he can give, my heart, and kept pumping and put enough oxygen, stored enough oxygen in my brain, which is why I'm not brain dead. Called 911, but they already had my times of death called because I was already pronounced dead. My heart stopped over 30 minutes each cardiac arrest. So I went there. It was awful. So everything you're saying is very familiar to me because that's how I suffered, but it's mainly most how PPCM women suffer. And it is the fluid. The fluid causes, there's a correlation between C-sections and PPCM on when it peaks. We have more of an infection. It's just, the pattern of words of women are heartbreaking because it's so preventable. And my cardiologist, Dr. Carol Watson at UCLA, who is, the head and the director of women's heart health there. And she even says every time there's a death or something, she says it's heartbreaking because it's all preventable as, early diagnosis, but they're not giving the test. And so I've started with her, she has developed a Zoom where she's collaborating cardiology with gynecology, but there's still a disconnect. Very much so. This is not just women's heart disease. This is a young woman, healthy pregnancy complication that turns into a heart disease. It doesn't have to become a heart disease. And when they say that PPCM is responsible for 1 in 20 heart transplants in the United States of America, when I'm told that it's all preventable, that it doesn't have to go that far, that it's medically proven, that if you are given the NT-proBNP test and you're giving it an EKG and you're monitoring the heart during pregnancy, then you'll never, ever, ever get symptoms, because when you cure the condition, you cure the symptoms. But nobody's curing the condition. They're just waiting for women to advocate for themselves as much as they can until they're at a life threat in the ER being saved by a God's grace. So that needs to change, which is why we are talking today and developing this women's pregnancy movement for women's health rights and starting to change history. And, we were chosen in this era to, speak up on this behalf because I always say every interview that women have been giving birth since the beginning of time. This should be an ancient conversation. We are having it for the first time. We are studies in this era to change history. Women have suffered and died long enough, and it's all preventable. We wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't preventable as early as 10 weeks pregnant. And it's really unfortunate that even after 5 years of me doing my due diligence and contacting not just California, but in every state in the United States of America, and there is absolutely very little awareness, but there is only awareness in the ER. So ER has the awareness, but so does the American Heart Association. They've had awareness now for a very, very, very long time. They've even said in their up and coming posts and stuff that they have known about women's pregnancy heart for over 20 years. They developed a feline pro BNP for cats that looks like a pregnancy test, which is really kind of like mind-boggling because we're pregnant as women and it's not available for humans, but it's available. But it's just not. No, the test that like the feline cat has and the dog, we don't have that. We do not have. And if you look it up. It's called SNAP, SNAP, Feline Pro BNP.
Okay.
And it says about preventing high risks for your cat, high risk for heart failure for your cat.
And we don't even have. That's
And
incredible.
we don't have it. And there are women that literally I have interviewed that says that if they were provided the NT-proBNP test during pregnancy, their baby would still be alive, because some have lost their baby a year after giving birth. And that's really quite sad. Some women are being diagnosed 4 years after pregnancy, after giving birth. And women like are saying, one woman said that she was diagnosed 4 years after she gave birth, and that she said it didn't sit dormant. It just was there, but nobody was listening to her. Nobody would listen. And they just kept blowing her off. And she finally got treatment now, after 4 years of being diagnosed and living with the symptoms. I'm getting not very, and somehow she doesn't know how she has been living and how she lived, and how, and her EF percent is very low. But this is the kind of like struggles that women all over the world go through, but specifically women in America, because for some reason, this has not been educated and addressed in the ACOG or any other college gynecology training courses. Because when I talk to midwives and doulas all over, they say that it doesn't exist, this information. One doula lost a sister-in-law that I interviewed. She passed away from peripartum cardiomyopathy recently, last year. And I said, really? I said, there's not even like a little like one-liner like at the bottom somewhere or anything, like something small, nothing. And she says, no. Now, you go to the ACOG, website, and you see who they support, and they support everything under the sun, even postpartum depression. But peripartum cardiomyopathy is not, it should be number one. If it's the only early diagnosis for women to suffer, and it's medically proven, and it's just, not many people will speak up. And I don't have, I was told at one point that I'm Braxton, which is basically I talk with, no kind of like, I don't want to sound that way. I want to sound like I'm not trying to speak to defend anybody or offend anybody. I mean, I don't mean to speak and offend the medical community. I don't mean to speak and offend the big associations that withheld this information, because what we don't know can hurt us, and what we do know can save us. I don't mean to be so blunt with what's been going on with women that have been coming to me for over 30, that have been recovered for over 30 years, and women that are coming to me that are just diagnosed in the exact same words and patterns of speech of how they were treated and cared for in the healthcare system has zero change in over 30 years. When women say to me that they've been working for the American Heart Association 12 years ago, they tried their hardest to get awareness out. They didn't have any support then. They didn't have support even, trying again. Other women, they're trying when they survive and they learn about this. But this is not, again, being educated. It's not being applied. It's not being trained in the areas that the people that need to be trained in the wheelhouse community of, the pregnancy field. It's considered what do they say? They are not interested in being informed, because I personally would rather be informed, know the prevention, and have the awareness than not, and choose to be ignorant, careless, and suffer until death with a disease that's preventable. I would choose the latter. I would choose the one that would actually prevent. And a lot of people are scared of getting a simple blood test. It's not made in a lab. Right. It's not a vaccination. It's a blood test. It's in your body. It's a number that should be known of how high or elevated that number is. And so it's really quite appalling, unacceptable, and beyond excusable on why this has not been properly circulated like cancer has, since the death rate is just the same as that, and the fluid does cause cancer, and with heart failure causes cancer, and you don't die from the heart failure, you die from the you don't die from the cancer, you die from the heart failure. So, it's like an ear, nose, and throat. There needs to be awareness of the NT-proBNP test, and after giving birth and having fluid, you have to be on that test to make sure those cancer cells that live in your body that just are there anyway don't get brought up from the trauma and get brought up, and once you know your BNP test and you say, okay, we can rule out the heart, it's cancer, then you get that taken care of, and then you won't have to die from cancer and go through all that suffering as well. You would just catch it before it becomes the disease. There are tests that can determine early diagnosis that can prevent a lot, and shame on this not being mandated when you leave the hospital, because I feel like if you know your BNP number also for your baby, think about how many less child cancer suffering there would have to be. And right. That's what gets me also too. So if you were to do your research and just even Google or whatever research you use on the internet and just say, does the NT-proBNP test determine, and then just fill in the blanks. Say cancer, say colon cancer, say pancreatic cancer, say dementia, say things that cause fluid, things that cause diseases. It's caused by our fluid in our blood in our body. And if we get the latex, magnesium drip, core beta blocker, whatever it is that the different preventions can be applied, then it would not just have less suffering for the individual, but for the families that have to watch the suffering. So, yeah, raising the awareness is what we just need to keep doing, and just learning about our children, because their studies, their PPCM babies.
And that's I am very interested in that, and that's why I think I've been so concerned about getting the correct diagnosis, because even after all of that happened, mm-hmm. since my echo was normal, they said that I could go home. They did other tests as well. Mm-hmm. I did spend 2 or 3 nights in the hospital, and they did they excluded PPCM. They said, well, you don't have that, so we think maybe now you have a heart dissection. That was one day. Then the next day they thought I had a blockage and that I would need to go have emergency heart surgery in the morning. Mm-hmm. Then they came in the morning and they said, actually, that's not that. You can go home. You're fine. As long as you can walk around.
But you were, in fact, PPCM.
Yes, I was PPCM. What's funny is that I feel like maybe when you're just in the medical field and you have to check boxes or something, and my boxes weren't all getting checked, so that wasn't it. But when you're looking in from the outside, all of my friends were texting me, you have PPCM. This is what you have. I know this is what you have. I'm going to join the PPCM group on Facebook. We're going to get to the bottom of this.
And this is, and just to put a pin on that, you know, I was just having a conversation with another woman last night, that the statistics, and I've known this too, I always say the statistics of what is provided out there is wrong because we don't have a diagnosis, and how many people are misdiagnosed. So that number is completely like fabricated. Like, that's like, to even give a statistic with zero diagnosis in America and to base it on even globally is wrong, because we don't, you know, there's so many more women that are not diagnosed, misdiagnosed, or never diagnosed. So what are they basing it on? Like, it's mind-blowing. And I cannot believe that here you have PPCM and they're giving you every other diagnosis but the actual diagnosis.
Then they sent me home without any medication. They told me to take ibuprofen. And in my chart, it says that I have pericarditis and a mental disorder.
Oh, you know, yeah. They said that's very common. And they also drug test. It's like women that are just pregnant or at, you know, or at the ER and they just gave birth. They're like, what? They do. It's really, really scary.
The nurse did mention that
that's
they were
common,
all trying to decide if I was just trying to get pills.
Right. That's common too.
On Christmas, take an ambulance so I could get some pills. And, you know, I wasn't acting out. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't, you know, I'm a very calm, collected person. And they were still kind of treating me in a way that they thought maybe something was kind of wrong with me.
I'm sorry. See, so that's part of the fight. That's when you're literally not being listened to. And I feel your energy. I mean, you're light. I mean, I have a very, like some people can suck the life out of me and drain me, you know, and some, you know, don't. And you're very calm, light, articulate, you know, it's the energy, not just you, it's the energy. And I can feel that. And for them to say that, is such a, they're like, they can't, it's like almost as if they have a handbook on how to brush off all women, even women that are, you know, soft and not aggressive. I mean, you know, it's almost as if, and again, like the feedback that I get is from a lot of women that are told is you're not using the right approach. And I've been told that a lot, actually. Is weird, but it's a hot topic is that what approach are you supposed to use when you're literally like in mercy?
Oh, so I went home. They made me go home, and that whole thing repeated itself about 4 times.
Right.
Started gaining fluid, heart rate went down to basically nothing, blood pressure through the roof, back to the emergency room over and over again.
Oh my gosh. And this is in Colorado. This is not in
Colorado. Some of the best hospitals.
Oh yeah. I mean, I went to Cedars-Sinai. Leah just died there November 21st, 2021, which is why I started this at Cedars-Sinai. They don't learn from past deaths. They don't learn from women that survived maternal mortality to educate. They won't listen then. They don't listen after, and they just don't. They continue not to listen. And really, you know, the best of the best. I mean, hospitals are like shopping malls, really. You know, the doctors are the ones that rent the space. So when they say, oh, this is such a great hospital, I'm like, well, what does that even mean? Like you're not going to, I don't know, like you wouldn't say, oh, this is the best, the best mall because it has, I don't know, Barney's. You know what I'm saying? Like there's,
Right.
like, you can't say it's the best hospital. You could say that this doctor is, one of the most amazing doctors because this doctor cares. But I went to the so-called the best hospital in Beverly Hills, Cedars-Sinai, the best doctors, and I have the best insurance that money can't buy because I'm motion picture pension and health plan. For over 18 years, I've been working top TV shows. I'm a Teamster. I've been doing location manager for a very long time. And I, realized that nobody's the best, not the hospital, not the individual doctors of the 20 odd something doctors that I saw there, even the ER clinic. They are not the best because they don't have awareness. And when they gain the awareness and they are educated, they do not apply practice and policy with what's going on in their hospital with women that are literally dying or suffering to death and being saved by a different hospital. And literally, it's not, there are so many wonderful hospitals. Yes, there are so many wonderful doctors. Yes, that provide the location for the doctors, because that's what the hospital is. The hospital just provides the location for these doctors. And, it's really quite unfortunate that nobody's communicating. The ERs are not communicating with each other, I don't feel, because if they did, maybe they could have done something even 30 years ago. Do you know what I'm saying? If they're the ones that were catching it and they're the ones that like literally have been saving women's lives at a life threat for this long, how come nobody stepped up? How come nobody has stepped up for women, until now in the ER in America? Why are survivors educating, the medical community and them not interested in being informed when it's life-saving? That to me is just on every level of humanity is not okay. It's just not. I mean, how many babies and mothers and families and divorces and, I lost my beautiful mother. She died. She got walking pneumonia, 4 months after my heart surgery. She was a mess, It was awful. Then my father died 18 months later, but they were in love and married since forever, since he was like a teenager. And, it's like this disease is a very traumatizing experience. And what's more traumatizing is the more we learn that it's traumatizing, that nobody has stepped up. I mean, it's like I'm traumatized for sure. I know you are.
And it continues, right? I don't know. Are you still dealing with anything? I mean, I went on to have inappropriate tachycardia syndrome, and then now I have POTS.
I have POTS. I have, I don't know if you can see, if you can see my veins, I had a deadly defibrillator that was implanted. I had a defibrillator so bad. I was allergic to the components. There needs to be more patch testing awareness as well as scar tissue prevention. You can prevent scar tissue, and a heart surgeon would say, oh, or no, that's just physiology, or Yeah, no, the, they would say it's not cosmetic surgery, but we have in this is actually internal medicine. If even more so, we should have that patch test because, or that scar tissue film prevention, whether it's cosmetic or not, you're still inserting in my heart. And I have always been allergic to like certain jewelries or things like this. And, you know, I always tried getting a belly button ring and I kept getting infections. It kept pushing it out. So here, if you know this, you don't. Now, I was pronounced dead, so my mother approved it. Bless her heart. So I couldn't advocate for myself. But I was allergic to the metals, titanium, and the nickel in the device, and they shoved it in my heart. So I was dying again. Awful. And then I was a liability, so nobody would take it out. So here I'm dying, and nobody would take it out. Dr. Carol Watson on Valentine's Day, and that time she went into my heart and she pulled it out, and she said, "You were in fact dying. Your heart was blue black. It was shrunk. And as soon as we pulled the wire out, and as soon as we pull that device out of your body, the defibrillator, your heart started to pump red. Your heart started to come back to its life." And they sent me home that day.
Oh my God.
And I've never felt better.
Yeah.
So I was tortured, a lab rat. I died, came back from the dead, died again, to find out that a stupid, simple blood test that only cost $15 would have saved my life, and that I never needed the defibrillator, and this didn't need to ever even happen. So I still struggle. I struggle with it mentally. I went on medication that has been doing amazing. The grief, I had to overcome that, which is why I took so long to get this docuseries started. I always said, I didn't get my right medical records ever. So from Cedars-Sinai. And so I'm a person that documents everything. So it's interesting that I would have a docuseries, but I've noticed that they have medical documentation. Where are the women's documentation? So our documentation is our living proof. We survived maternal mortality that has been going on since the beginning of time. We have the prevention. We know that an EKG and an NT-proBNP test, as well as seeing the heart in a chest x-ray, will determine the diagnosis. We know that a cat has a pregnancy life-saving BNP test at home. And so they are, the owners of that cat can bring that diagnosis to the vet so it can be taken care of. If we had a diagnosis at home, then we could take that to the ER, and then they would be diagnosed and can treat us. That would save, that would have saved you having to go and repeat, over and over and over again, those symptoms, and having to go back and to say, and to try to advocate and plead for your life. The fact that you're here today is like an absolute miracle, because, you were sent home so many times, and you did have to go through that whole, insanity. And, when, they say the definition of crazy is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. You weren't crazy. The medical community was crazy, because they kept sending you home and nothing was changing. And so the definition of doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, and obviously your results were the same and they kept doing it, they're crazy.
Thank you.
Okay. So you're not crazy. So when they said that to you, that something with mental health, you can go back and say, I'm more evolved now, and I'm educated to the point where I can articulate and tell them, you're freaking nuts. You knew by time 2 or 3 after sending me home, you saw it. You saw it on my files. They had it. I told you. And you're telling me I'm crazy when you're the one that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't have any common sense. You don't know how to apply, medicine is practice. And they're not using the right practice and studies when they're looking at the study in the face. You were standing right there.
I always think about how I can get someone to listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the way you get them to listen is by causing them some sort of, not like physical pain, but money, right? So I'm going to hire a lawyer. So that was my thought. So I reached out to some lawyers. Of course, this is a very interesting story, something that they would really like to take on, right?
No, they're not interested. Unless they chop your leg off or wrong leg off, or they leave a utensil inside of you, you cannot sue. Obama made that happen. He made sure of that.
Well, they said that because I have inappropriate tachycardia syndrome and I have POTS, and that was probably from the misdiagnosis, I can sue. But what we thought was interesting in our discussion is, who do we sue? I mean, of course they want to sue the hospital, but you could sue the OB, because while she was well aware that, I had all of these symptoms, no one told me to see a cardiologist. They just told me to see a general physician. Pregnancy can cause diabetes. I'm well aware of that. And I had to get tested for it. I wasn't showing any signs that I had diabetes. I'm showing signs that I am having heart failure, but no one's testing for that. No one informed me that I could get heart failure due to pregnancy. I was well aware that I could get diabetes from it. But so then they go to the nurse practitioner. She never recommended me going to the cardiologist. I went to the hospital. I saw so many cardiologists, went to so many hospitals. Even after that, I've seen so many cardiologists.
So who do you sue?
And that's what the lawyer was saying. He's like, this is really amazing that there is something like this out there, and every single person missed it. And they did. And to this day, the only person that has said that I had PPCM is you, and Dr. James Fett on this Facebook group. Other than that, everyone has just kind of blown it off as well, saying that it was just some sort of fluid overload in my body. And obviously that first doctor that I talked about, I did get his name. It was Dr. Blotnick at St. Anthony's North. He said it was PPCM, and he gave us his personal cell phone number to have to stay in contact with him.
What was his name again?
Dr. Blotnick. It's either Blotnick with a B, Blotnik.
Is he in Colorado?
Yeah, he's in Colorado, okay. Or it's with a P. And I can email you and let you know which one it is. But he's the one that, when the other doctors were saying that's not what it is, he's still disagreeing. But other than that, to this day, I can't get that sort of diagnosis. And it's not like I want it. I just want to know what it is, because is it something that I need to let my daughter know? Is there something?
Yes, absolutely. And, she's part of that placenta, that growth. So, our children are studies, and you have to know. And I feel like, and I had this conversation on one of the interviews, I feel like if there's early diagnosis as early as 10 weeks pregnant, I wonder if there's even early diagnosis before pregnancy, even before you get, let's say, your period. And so if there's our daughters, I don't have a daughter, but when I mean like our daughters, like our womanhood of the daughters of our next generation, if they get the BNP test before they even get their period, then let's say you compare that number yearly to when they get their period at 13 years old, 14, whatever age that they get their period. And then monitor that. If there are signs of elevation and possible, and this is you know, I'm not a doctor, but I'm trying to use my common sense here.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe, and again, this could be a Dr. Fett question, but maybe we don't know because we haven't done the studies yet on a young girl, you know, up until she gets her period, up until after she gets her period, before she gets pregnant, during pregnancy. Maybe there can be an early diagnosis before even pregnancy around the period.
Right.
And I feel like we're not there yet of even knowing like what, you know, you would have to place your daughter in a study, like a lifetime study, because we don't have that. I mean, again, women have been giving birth since the beginning of time, but we've never thought of, you know, studying the woman's placenta as it grows during pregnancy and what that can do for the child. And there is a mutation gene code blood test that is a DNA blood test that can determine if it's genetic. And that is something that I have. I can email you as well. Those genetic, you know, the codes, as well as, you know, try to see if, you know, you might want to try to see if, even though you're not pregnant, I'm going to try too. I want to get the SFLT1 and the PIGF.
Can you send that to me?
It's the cardiotoxic disease. It's the cardiotoxic blood test and the PIGF, which is the placental growth factor test. And they called it a kit and an instrument, which I find that I don't understand yet about that, why it's called a kit. Maybe they do that because it has to be ordered in a blood lab. But I'd like to, you know, kind of do a study on myself.
Yeah.
And whoever would be willing to do that for a young woman who like a young lady who just got her period. I'm talking like within the week that she gets her period. Do you know what I'm saying? And then follow up. There has to be a study on women. And we don't like that. Maybe we do. Maybe it's part of the center. I don't know if there is one where a PPCM girl, you know, for my son, I'd like to, you know, I have his BNP and his EKG on the refrigerator. I still have yet not to get it yet. But I think it's different for a boy than it is for a girl. But I would like to still study that because that's an assumption. That's me making an assumption. I don't know. And what we don't know, we don't know. And what we know, you know, and what we know is what we don't know everything.
Right.
And we don't have enough information and it's not out there. So we kind of have to take it on ourselves as women in 2022, in this era, in our lifetime, to try to figure this out for our grandchildren.
Well, you know, I am definitely interested in all of that. I'm also interested in helping inform maybe some of the hospitals here. I've just recently moved to Iowa, but you know, my cardiologist here has very little information on it. And the part that I find so disheartening is that while having little information, they yet to seek more information. I show up for my second appointment. They know nothing. There's nothing new.
I have a PowerPoint presentation that I've been developing. I want to add a few more graphs to that.
Okay.
I can share that and you can share it with them.
Absolutely.
As well. as well as, you know, I do have flyers I would like to update, you know, just kind of the symptoms and things of that, you know, update the flyer. I mean, the flyer is pretty much updated, but I always add something and ask if they could be taped in the bathroom when women are giving their glucose test. Do you
Right.
have this such and such and such, you know, like a self-test?
Maybe you could add, and I have to go because my kids are acting
Yeah,
up, but maybe
my
you could
son.
add that
Mhm.
that you can have preserved ejection fraction, because someone made a note of that on Facebook that, you know, while we have a better outcome, right? Because
Mhm.
our heart is fine. While going through it, I think that we do maybe have a little bit higher risk of death because no one's treating me. They're just letting me be. So I don't know if
No,
you if that's
absolutely. M-
something.
Message me that and then go on ppcmfund.com and then
Okay.
go to the hamburger bar on the left and then just do the drop down. And then we have a downloadable flyer
Oh,
that
okay.
you can print and then like take notes, be like, um, maybe add this, you know, that let's like create, um, I have another visual that I think I want to include because it literally shows you the baby in the belly and with the heart and the BNP with the brain and how that all like kind of ties through and why this test is the early diagnosis. And I have that. So I'm going
Okay.
to redo it anyway. But we can work on that, you know, because this is something that, you know, again, you have to actually physically, I think, be in contact with these relationship doctors. I don't necessarily think you could just go in blindly and just like tape everything. You have to get like approval and all of
Sure.
that. And not many, again, not many doctors or like obstetricians yet. I've tried, but they say no. So I'm curious
Right.
what happens in Iowa because in California, it's no bueno. Can't.
Everyone here is as nice as you could possibly imagine. So I feel like they will be very, very open to it
Okay.
and welcoming. And I don't think it would be an issue. I'd be more than happy to try it. And I think I could come at it in a way that won't offend them and would be effective.
Okay. Well, then that would
Yeah.
be that would be amazing. I do come off somewhat offensive or
I think that you went through a lot, and so did I. But I think that we harbor a lot of anger and
I do.
resentment for sure, and
It comes out too
yeah,
sometimes. I mean,
yeah,
don't put me
absolutely.
in a room with a bunch of doctors
I know.
or birthing professionals.
Right.
Like just don't.
If you want to see me the least impressed, tell me you're a doctor.
Yeah, it's scary for me. And then, you know, I'm like really cool and collected. And I'm like, you know, until, you know, I have to keep, focused and loyal to women that have this disease and that survive it. I can't be worried about who I'm going to offend in the process while
Right.
defending this disease. You
Right.
know, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm just trying to talk about the painful truth on what has been actually really going on.
Right.
And, you know, like I said, there are, you know, many wonderful doctors and hospitals and nurses and everybody, but I'm angry that nobody's spoken up ever.
Because when I
They
do,
started groups, but no one's really ever had real change, and I
Mhm.
don't know why.
You mean among us,
No,
the
among the authority of the people that have known about this,
right,
that have been triggered a flag, that have you know, that women have been suffering and being diagnosed in the ER for how long? Since the beginning of time.
Mm-hmm.
Obstetricians, nurses that are working for OBs that see pregnant women, seeing them monthly through their visits, not noticing, not connecting the dots sooner,
Right.
and not talking about it sooner, not just kind of going off, on their daily, their daily routine, and the chain has not been broken of this preventable catastrophe. So, it's hard to generalize and say, oh, the medical community, this, and then everybody in it. No, but it's the ones who have been aware, the American Heart Association, this is their area. They have tons of money. They are given money all the time. Awareness does not cost anything. Lives are priceless, and early diagnosis saves. And they have withheld this information. And I don't know how to not say that, because it's true.
Right.
I'm sorry. I love the American Heart Association for helping women's heart this whole way. But this is a very specific area, and they could have really have done something a lot sooner. It shouldn't be catch up time now that survivors are starting to speak up. Oh, we better get on this. No, it should have been on it 12, 15 years ago, when women are working for the American Heart Association saying, hey, I was just diagnosed this and we need to do something. And it wasn't done.
Right.
Why?
Okay, well, I better go with my children. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and and just getting even more, a little bit more information from you, because like I'm saying, if I'm not receiving a diagnosis, I myself am not informed. The only information I can get about what I have that is pretty seriously a serious condition is from Googling it. I haven't received any new information from any cardiologist I have received. I have received incorrect information.
We have the correct information on our website at ppcmfund.com, and we're getting new studies that we will be uploading as the years, get these blood codes and the studies and the medical proof. It will always be updated on the website.
Okay.
So, and the group sites, but it was such a pleasure, speaking with you as well. And, this is always an event for me as well as an event for you, but it's to also provide, hopefully, saving lives with us coming together, and whoever's listening, as well as justice within ourselves to be able to freely talk about it and finally be actually listened to with, without ignorance, so thank you so much.
Thank
Have
you.
a lovely
Thank
day.
you. You too. I'll be in touch though. Thanks.
Absolutely. Same.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for joining us and listening to the PPCM Fund podcast. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. PPCM's Painful Truth is made possible through the generous support of donors like you. Help us spread the awareness by donating at ppcmfund.com, or click the link below to become a member through Ko-fi. Have a great day.